Modern Warfare Zombies is over. And if you want to see the entire thing, the final story mission, I put that video up yesterday without commentary or anything. In today's video, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I'm still going to show you the end of Modern Warfare Zombies, but I kind of want to look back at how well it did. How good was it as a new Call of Duty mode, as a Zombies mode? And as some of you might have guessed, this will probably turn into a bit of a rant. So let's rewind a little bit back to what I see as the peak of Black Ops Zombies. I know lots of people will see it as being Black Ops 2 or Black Ops 3. For me, it was Black Ops 4. While I know it was kind of controversial in a lot of ways, particularly with how they changed the game mechanics, Black Ops 4 was undoubtedly when they spent the most money on zombies. Like, we got so many maps in that game. There were tons of maps with completely unique assets for each map. You know, we had a map in a Coliseum, and there were special enemies just for a Coliseum, a special wonder weapon just for that area, loads of unique mechanics for the Easter eggs. Then we had a map on the Titanic in Voyage of Despair, and both those maps came out with the game, and they were huge, they were unique, they were super creative. Yes, they were difficult, and like I said, people didn't like how they changed the way perks worked and things like that, but they were a lot of fun, and there was just so much content there. Across the entire year of Black Ops 4, that continued, that we kept on getting those new maps. I think the Chaos maps were absolutely brilliant. They were trying out a new story, they had new characters, new voice lines, while also trying to keep the old story going, the Ether story going, for the people that cared about that. Then came Black Ops Cold War, and that was the first Black Ops game, the first Zombies game since Modern Warfare 2019, and Activision started the whole idea of connecting every part of Call of Duty, trying to make it as much of a shared experience as possible. So the campaign, Warzone, multiplayer, whatever the third modes were, like Zombies, they wanted them all to connect together. And at the time, I was kind of hopeful for that. I thought maybe it would mean more progression, less bugs, more kind of them building on what they'd done before rather than going backwards every game, which was always a thing with Call of Duty. But instead, it ended up with everything just getting kind of bland. And I know they'd reused assets and maps and weapons and things like that before in Zombies, but it felt like it was a kind of new low with Black Ops Cold War. And as a content creator, Black Ops Cold War is when I really started playing Zombies. In the summer leading up to it, Greg FPS took me through all of the Zombies Easter eggs for Black Ops 3, and then we started Black Ops Cold War with me on a team with Noah and Codename Pizza, doing D-Machine and getting worlds first. Like, that should have been an incredible start to Zombies. And I did really enjoy Black Ops Cold War when it came out. I thought the changes they'd made to the mechanics were actually pretty good. Like, it was a fun game to play. The only thing that was a big problem were the maps, that there just weren't many. We had D-Machine for quite a while, and then we finally got Firebase Z, and it was like, oh, this is another military complex. Like, this just looks like everything else in Call of Duty. And then we had Toten, which was pretty creative. It was obviously apart from the campaign, but they'd added lots of new areas that we hadn't really seen before, and I thought that was pretty cool. It had some fun new ideas. That sort of moment where Klaus stops the train, I thought that was awesome. That was really, really cool. And then we finished up with Forsaken, which again was just kind of, oh, this is an area that we've seen before. It's a multiplayer map, it's in campaign as well, and it feels like another military base. I know it had that feeling of kind of, oh, it's an American town as a training area, but really it felt more like a military base to me. And it just kind of felt bland. It just felt like stuff we'd seen before. It had some nice touches. The new wonder weapon, the axe, was really, really cool. But the Easter egg and everything like that just felt a little bit basic, a little bit bland. And that stung more because it was only 4 maps. Like, that was the last map that we got. We only got 4 round-based maps in that game. And that was kind of disappointing to me, that all of those maps were okay at best, and they were all a little bit bland. They felt like everything else in the game. And while the mechanics were good, everything else was just a little bit tedious. Now, they did try other stuff in Black Ops Cold War. We got Outbreak, which was just using the big fire teams maps, so they weren't making unique maps for them, except for the Easter egg. The Easter egg in the silo I thought was pretty cool. But all the mechanics and things like that clearly weren't designed around a big Zombies experience. It felt a bit like it was just a mod to fire teams, and that's been the theme going on with Call of Duty ever since then. Everything feels like they're just modding whatever the core experience is, rather than making something completely unique like they did with Black Ops 4. And Outbreak kind of petered out. I get the impression, although apparently more people were playing that than had ever played other Zombies modes before, it still paled in comparison to things like Warzone, so that's where their investment was going. They weren't investing in Outbreak. While we had kind of a really cool first Easter egg, although the searching around and setting up for it took way too long, the second Easter egg was a lot less exciting and kind of didn't use anything that was particularly unique, and it just felt like Outbreak faded away into nothingness. Then, since Black Ops Cold War, Zombies obviously had kind of a hard time. We had Vanguard come out, and Vanguard Zombies was absolutely terrible. Again, going back to that idea of it just felt like a mod. We didn't have unique maps created just for it. Well, not at first. We did eventually, although then it was just a remade map anyway. And although they did try new things with the kind of roguelike elements, it was clear that they hadn't really put a lot of focus into it, that they were just trying to cobble together what they could from things that already worked in the game, and it ended up being an experience that just wasn't a lot of fun. There were so few enemy types, there was so much repetition in terms of what you did. You could literally play one match of each map on Vanguard, and you'd basically seen everything. We didn't even get Easter eggs or anything like that for quite a while, and when we did get Easter eggs, again, they were super basic and really boring. The voice acting and the writing in particular were terrible. I've always thought the Zombies writing was really, really bad. I wish they would hire, you know, horror writers or something like that just to kind of change things up and get some real character development and some fun plot twists and things like that. But we'll talk a bit more about that later. So after Vanguard, we obviously had a bit of a break from Zombies. We didn't get anything in Modern Warfare 2, and then Modern Warfare 3 brought out MWZ. Now, a lot of people like me who were kind of fans of Zombies in the past and also fans of DMZ were quite excited about this. It was obviously based on DMZ. At the beginning, it even came up with DMZ on the screen while you were loading in, which was kind of crazy. It was going to be on a big map, or at least the first map was going to be on a big map, so we were really excited about that. It was going to be a kind of new experience for it, and it had elements of things like DMZ, you know, where you were going to be extracting and trying to get stuff out to make yourself more powerful for the next time, and if you died, you lost everything. And at first, I think MWZ was pretty fun. The missions were really, really cool. It was a kind of novelty seeing other players running around on a map too. Sometimes they could help you out with missions and things like that. But it did fall into the same problem that Zombies always has before for me, in that it was way too easy at the beginning, and then once you got set up, the challenge kind of faded away. Like, it wasn't long before people worked out how to play MWZ, and could fairly easily be running around in the top tier zone where they said, oh, that's going to be a real challenge, everyone's going to have a hard time with that. It wasn't long before people just found weapons and gear that worked well, and just ran around doing stuff in there without too much challenge to themselves at all. And at that point, once the story missions were done and you knew how to survive in Tier 3, there wasn't really anything else to do in the mode. And then when it came to support, there was very little. We only got new missions in the kind of reloaded parts of the seasons, and we didn't even always get that. There was one season, I think season 4, where we didn't get any new story missions or anything. And then while DMZ added tons of new missions with each update and huge new maps, some maps which were unique to DMZ, even if they looked like everything else in Call of Duty at that point, MWZ just didn't really. They added one new story mission with each update, like I said, except for Season 4 Reloaded. And the maps, all the things that they added, like even this one that you can see now, is just made up of elements from Al Mazrah. This is the most creative one. This is the final mission. They did this whole thing with stuff flying in the air, but to me at least, it still just looks like, oh, it's lots of pieces of Al Mazrah just floating around. And that's not terribly exciting. I would have much preferred if they'd done something completely new, which obviously could be cost prohibitive, but luckily I'm a player. I don't need to worry that much about how much they're spending on making this game. I just want to experience something new. And so MWZ got stale really quickly because every season there wasn't much to come back for. They'd add a new warlord, which meant there was a few new AI enemies that were really easy to kill in different areas of the map, but you didn't get anything for doing it, and the experience of killing them wasn't particularly interesting. And the whole idea of there being loads of other players on the map basically became irrelevant. If you didn't need other players to help you, the only thing they could do is get in the way, whether that was them crashing servers by putting loads of sentry guns down at the beginning, or it was them grabbing all of the things you needed for an unstable rift, grabbing your unstable rift portal, they would just get in the way. Even when we were queuing in for this to do the final story mission, we had to wait for the matchmaking. We had to wait for it to find other people to put us in a game with, when I didn't care about there being anyone else in the game. Now, obviously, there's much more to MWZ than just the story missions and the maps. There's mechanics, but all of the mechanics basically have been taken from other games. We didn't get any new perks. We only got a couple of new enemy types. We got the giant worm and then the boss from this mode. They gave us some vague variations on enemy types, like the disciples, but it didn't really change anything in terms of gameplay. All of the stuff that we got, all of the tacticals, all of the lethals, the wonder weapons, it all felt very much the same as what we'd seen before, or at least kind of rehashes of things we've seen before, and things like the vril, which I just never see people use at all. So I found MWZ pretty disappointing. I know there's some people who have been very excited about the story. I've seen some zombies YouTubers make videos talking about how crazy it is and how exciting it is, all the things that have happened. But to me, the only sort of trick they've had in the story is occasionally mentioning someone from a previous game. Occasionally being like, they mentioned Richtfen, I know who Richtfen is, or Ava's connected to Maxis, I know who Maxis is. It's like that Family Guy style of humor where it's just like, you get the reference, and that's it. That's the only value you're getting out of it. None of these characters are interesting. None of these characters have, like, interesting development. There's no, like, fun twists or anything like that. It really just feels like they're spinning their wheels and occasionally name-dropping an old character, so the fans will go crazy, being like, what does it mean? Now, I've said before, I don't really think the zombie story is good. I don't think the Aether story is good. I think they've been obviously making it up as they go along, and at various times they've gone from it being kind of a joke to them trying to take it way too seriously, but not doing a particularly good job of that. It's just covering up how meaningless the whole story is with a load of complexity, and not complexity in a kind of deep and interesting way, but just complexity in a, we're going to add so many little things, so many little MacGuffins and little magical elements that make it so only the most hardcore zombies fans will know what's going on, so they can gatekeep it and they can tell people, you don't like it because you don't really understand it and you need to watch a 6-hour video explaining what's going on. But I can save you that time. It is not worth watching a 6-hour video to find out what's happening in the zombie storyline. It's all just a load of nonsense. It's just this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then he blew up, then he died, then he came back because he wasn't really dead. Then it's an alternate universe, then there's a big monster, then there's a bigger monster, then there's something much scarier, then they reset the universe, but did they really reset the universe? It's just that kind of, as I said, making it up as they go along. I was an English teacher for 13 years, and it's exactly the kind of writing you would see teenage boys, sort of, 12 to 14-year-old boys. This is the sort of stuff they would write for creative writing. And so finally we get onto the final mission, the mission that you're seeing now. And the reason I really made this video is because I saw a few Call of Duty YouTubers posting tweets saying, oh my god, that was amazing, that was incredible, the story was amazing, the final cutscene was amazing, the final boss was amazing. And it really surprised me because when I played it, I was just like, this is like better than the stuff that we'd had before in MWZ, and I definitely think it is. I think this final story mission is better than the stuff that we'd seen before in MWZ, but I also think that's not saying much, and I think talking about this as if it's some incredible gameplay experience, it's really just kind of showing how little we expect from zombies and how low the standards are for something to be seen as good in zombies. Also, I just kept using that R4 detector because they gave me one in this map, so I thought, okay, I'll have a look to see if I can find anything with it. And then I realized its only real function that I could find so far was to take cool screenshots, so that's what I was doing. I'm guessing there's some code somewhere which helps you to unlock the other relics. I'm sure someone will have worked that out by now. But anyway, back to the mission. So, at this point in the mission, you're basically told that you need to do these things with a pylon, where apparently Jansen now has this ability to cleanse items at these mysterious pylons. The whole thing's just, a MacGuffin thing. It doesn't need to make any sense. There's no real sense in why you're trying to run around and pick up items and put them back on these pylons. I think they just had the asset for the pylons because they'd used that before, and they were like, okay, we'll do that again. We've got all of these models for all of these objects that you've used before. That's like, if you think about it, it's really ridiculous that there's like a floating CCTV camera and some gloves and things like that. Just things that they clearly had the models already for, rather than creating something new, and you just run around and grab them and it's like, oh yeah, these are relics. These have serious magical power. And I don't think, I mean, I might be wrong here, I'm sure someone can correct me in the comments, I don't think they really explained why, whenever we go into Dark Aether, it's just Al Mazrah. It's just bits of Al Mazrah rearranged. I'm not sure if there's a lore reason for that, but obviously the real reason is, again, they had all of these assets, they had all these models, all these bits of the map. It was much easier for them to do this. I get the impression MWZ was created by quite a small team, that they were just told, okay, we'd love to have something to do with zombies. Here is the library of things that we have for Call of Duty. For, you know, these are the things that will be already loaded onto people's PCs. So stuff from Warzone, stuff from campaign, stuff from multiplayer. Make something out of that. You can do some new voice acting, we'll give you that. But that's it. Not too many animated cutscenes, because obviously those are super expensive. So we'll just have the characters' faces appear at the right and we'll do some new voice acting for it. And then there's this section where you're asked to climb up to the top of the tower. And Jansen and Ravenov, who are with you, they just teleport. They just teleport from place to place. You're doing all of this work to try and climb up this tower, and they'll just constantly appear wherever it is you are. So here, they're just fighting alongside you. They can't die or anything like that. There's no kind of gameplay interaction with them. You can completely ignore them in this mission, but you do all of this crazy jumping and climbing, and look, there they are. They've just teleported. And they even, you know, they obviously teleport. It's not something that's hidden. It's not just like a game thing, like that Sherlock Holmes game with the creepy Watson. I love that video. But it's not like that. It's just, oh yeah, they say they can teleport, but you can't, so you're going to have to go the long way. It just feels cheap. Again, it feels like a mod. Like, I grew up playing FPS games in the 90s and the early 2000s, where often you would play mods and total conversions and things like that. And it felt like this, where you could clearly see, okay, the person modding it can't be creating new assets and new models and new animations. They don't have that skill set. So instead, they're just trying to rearrange what's already in the game. And that's what MWZ has felt like. And this final mission is like an extreme of them rearranging it. Like, look, these buses are flying. But they are still the same models from the buses that weren't flying that we had in Al Mazrah. The whole thing just seems like a mod. I can't explain it any clearer than that. And I kind of wish that the Zombies community, or at least the creators that I've seen talking about this, would kind of acknowledge that it's a sad state that Zombies is in. That it just feels like, okay, we can't expect anything better than this. We're going to have the same enemies again. Look, there's some Disciples, there's some Mimics, there's some Manglers. They're going to be running at you. There's no interesting AI, there's no interesting gameplay mechanics. Nothing's really changing. I think in this map they changed it so if you jump really far, you make an explosion when you land, maybe? I think that's a thing, which obviously is a thing that's been used in other Call of Duty games, like, you know, the Jug can do that and stuff. And this is sort of typical of Call of Duty at the moment. I saw their campaign trailer that they released for Gamescom, where they showed off a bit of the mission, and it's like, oh, there's a big enemy coming, they're going to try and take us out. Oh, it's a Juggernaut. It's the same Juggernaut we've seen a million times before. Someone who's heavily armored and has a minigun, even though that's a weird, unrealistic, silly idea of some guy wandering around with a big old minigun. They're going to use that again. I mean, I hate to think how many times that they've appeared in Call of Duty. Instead of thinking up something new, instead of having some new type of enemy, some new kind of interesting gameplay thing, it's just another Jug. I don't know why I missed that one. I was kind of annoyed that I missed that jump there. And while I'm talking about zombies in particular in this video, while I'm talking about the problems with it, are really just typical of all of Call of Duty at the moment. That all of Call of Duty is feeling more and more bland and more cheap, really, because whenever they create something new, you know you're going to be seeing it absolutely all over the place. And the new things they create are very, very few and far between. Like with Black Ops 6, obviously, Omni movement is the big thing they're talking about. And it seems like kind of a shame that Omni movement is the only really new thing. I think there's some fun quality of life changes coming to Black Ops 6 that I'm excited about, like being able to rearrange your HUD and stuff like that. I think that's genuinely cool. But it just feels weird that, like, their big new thing is, oh, you can sprint and jump backwards and sideways now. And in that campaign video they showed off, it was like, oh, you're still doing the same thing, you're still fighting completely mindless enemies, you're still just going into an environment where everything's locked off while you fight off a wave of enemies, but now you can jump behind a table. And then a door will open and then you'll carry on. And it's still the same kind of vehicle things. Oh, you're sitting on the back of a motorbike, shooting things that are obviously pre-scripted, so those trucks are going to crash whether you shoot them or not. It's just a lot of stuff that we've been seeing over and over again in Call of Duty for, like, you know, 20 years now. And they haven't progressed further than that. They haven't done more interesting things. And other games have. You know, you look at Halo changing the way combat worked with the shields and having to switch between plasma and bullets. Or you look at games like Half-Life, where they started introducing some surprisingly smart enemies alongside all the zombies and monsters and stuff. You'd fight those Spec Ops soldiers or those ninjas that would be a real pain because they felt like they were quite smart and it felt like they were communicating with each other. In Call of Duty, we're still just running into a combat arena and then fighting a load of completely mindless enemies that run towards you, whether you're playing zombies or not. So let's skip ahead a little bit now to the boss. Now, like I said, lots of Call of Duty YouTubers, Zombies YouTubers have been praising this boss and saying, oh my god, that was awesome, that was epic, that was amazing. That's really the thing that inspired me to make this video, because this boss fight was not. It was not amazing. It was like an early 2000s boss fight. Basically, what happens is you have all of these floating platforms. We've seen that in lots of games before. We've seen that back in the original Half-Life. You've got low gravity, some floating platforms, some little jump pad things that look very silly. No explanation, I don't think, for why there's a load of jump pads that are very helpful to you. You're running around a load of the desert environment that was in the Al Mazrah map, while Jansen does some magic on a CCTV camera that I find so silly. And then here's the boss. A big woman. And it's like, okay, a giant version of a person. That's sort of typical for first-person shooter bosses. And then at first, it's weird here. You can kind of shoot her at times, but then you can't. Other times, see there, I get hit markers. It just feels a bit broken, but everyone just kind of ignores that because that's what we expect of Call of Duty now, that it's like, oh, sometimes I'm getting hit markers, sometimes I'm not. At that point, it wasn't super clear what we were meant to be doing. And then later on in the boss fight, yep, there's a big laser goes across and she has glowing orbs on her that you have to shoot. Like, this is the most, well, the second most basic type of FPS boss. The most basic is just a big bullet sponge, I guess. But this is a boss that has glowing weak points that you have to shoot, and then you have to move a little bit and do the whole thing again. And you do that 4 times. While fighting a load of zombies, but it's just all the enemies that you've been fighting before. Not using the worms, which seems strange. I'm surprised that they didn't bring the worms back. Maybe they forgot about them. But yeah, this to me feels like an incredibly basic boss fight. I mean, maybe I've been spoiled because I've played lots of Destiny and Destiny 2. That's a first-person shooter game where the bosses all have really interesting mechanics. You have to work together as a team with everyone having their own jobs, or you can pull it off solo, but you have to be insanely good to do it. The bosses are really interesting. They're not just always giant versions of enemies, although they are quite often giant versions of enemies. But this to me feels like a very low effort version. And when I say low effort, I have to be a bit careful of that, because I don't think the people who are actually making this stuff are doing anything wrong. I think they're doing a great job of trying to cobble together what they can. But I think it goes back to this idea of it's just a mod. It's just a mod for the things that they already have in Call of Duty. They're not making unique things for this. I mean, maybe that model for the boss is a unique thing. I wouldn't be surprised if it's been used before. And now they've just slapped this kind of Orion skin on it with the stars in it. Absolutely no idea. But I think the real fault lies with the people like the producers, the people at Activision who are in charge of this whole franchise and are like, oh, you don't really need artists working on this. You don't need writers working on this. You don't need people to be dedicated to making new stuff just for an MWZ mission. You can just use stuff that we already have, right? And then the people who make it have to kind of make do with maybe a short timeline, not many resources, a small team, having to make do with stuff that they already have rather than getting to make new things. It feels like a real shame. It feels like a missed opportunity. And the fact that Zombies YouTubers are talking about how incredible this is and how amazing it is going to appear to those producers who I'm sure will look at some of those big Zombies YouTubers content for feedback, and they'll be like, oh look, they're saying it's amazing. You don't need artists, you don't need to make new stuff. Like, what we're doing right now is working absolutely fine. And that's what's kind of annoyed me about this whole thing. That to me, MWZ was like another example of Call of Duty seeing how much they can get away with. What's the bare minimum they can do to still get people talking positively about it, playing the game, buying the games and stuff like that? And if they can do something like this, which I think is like really kind of scraping the barrel, not doing anything to kind of push the genre forwards in any way, not doing anything interesting or creative, and people are like, oh my god, it's amazing, there was a really big boss and we got to shoot weak points on them. If that's the kind of bar that they're aiming at, they're not going to invest more, they're not going to try more. Because why do they need to? They're still making the same amount of money while doing so little. And they've been doing that since Black Ops 4. That's why I think Black Ops 4 is the peak. That's the point where they were investing loads into zombies to try and do something really interesting with it. And ever since then, they've been trying to see what they can get away with. They've been trying to do as little as possible to keep you entertained enough to keep playing it. And people have been lapping it up. I know there have been lots of people saying that MWZ wasn't good. There's lots of people that desperately want round-based zombies again. And I would say the cutscene at the end of this does kind of build up the idea that maybe the second map in Black Ops 6, Liberty Falls, is going to be more exciting than I thought it was. I thought it was just, you know, a multiplayer map, essentially, that they were putting zombies on. I'm holding my breath a little bit because they said that about, what was that mode called? Onslaught, something like that, in Black Ops Cold War, where you just played it on multiplayer maps, and they did kind of work that into the lore and try and make out that was something more interesting than it was. But we'll see. Hopefully Liberty Falls is a bigger deal and they are doing something really interesting with that. But if this is the kind of level they're aiming at, if this is the level where they can get the community, the biggest voice in the community, to be saying, oh yeah, this is amazing, this is incredible, you need to go play this, you need to go buy this game and play this, then I think we're in for a pretty rough time. Now, obviously, I know there's reasons why they might be saying stuff like that. They want people to go watch their videos of this boss fight. They want people to get excited about zombies because, you know, that's where their money comes from. It's also COD Next very soon. They're going to be flying out to Washington. It might be kind of awkward if they've just been slagging off the game and saying how terrible it is, and then they have to go meet a bunch of the people that have been making it. That would be maybe a little bit embarrassing for them. But to me, I played this final mission of MWZ, and it just kind of cemented what I thought about MWZ ever since the first mid-season update where we were meant to get new content, that they're just doing as little as humanly possible. And I'm starting to get a little bit excited about Black Ops 6. You know, Terminus has the whole thing with the boats and going to different islands. That looks genuinely new, and it looks like they've done something different that we haven't really seen in Zombies before. There is a new perk, there is a new wonder weapon, there's new enemy types. It does look like they're creating stuff just for zombies, that they've invested a bit more into it. So I'm hopeful. I'm hoping that it's going to be really good. But I think to praise this, to praise whatever MWZ was, and, you know, I kind of feel the same about DMZ, that it always felt a bit like a mod to Warzone. To praise them for doing that and to say, oh, this is amazing, we want more of that, is just kind of a mistake. I am lucky enough that I'm a creator that doesn't just play Call of Duty. I play lots and lots of other games. And it's weird seeing so many other games kind of pushing their genres forward and doing really creative things and having all these like little interesting moments that feel like nothing else. And then coming back to Call of Duty, one of the most successful games ever, and seeing them just doing the same things over and over and over again and being a bit stuck in the past and still being so successful. It just kind of boggles my mind a little bit. But anyway, that has been a very long rant. Well done if you made it this far. Let's do it again, where say in the comments if you made it. Just type in, I made it, before you say whatever else you want to say. And then let me know, what did you think of MWZ overall? Do you agree with me? Do you maybe think maybe you're a bit kinder towards it? Maybe you like it? Maybe you hated it more? Maybe you just gave up on it entirely? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, turn your notifications on, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.